can address them, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. Like Mr. Stanton referenced, our office did review the Act 537 plan amendment that was prepared by Lennon Smith. We issued our letter in advance of this meeting. I'll take a quick breeze through this, go right down the list. Items 1 through 4, I believe, are fairly administrative in nature, revisions that are going to be made by Lennon Smith, or should be considered to be made by Lennon Smith. We spoke about item number 6 a moment ago. Item number 7 is just an inconsistency that I think we can revise. So I guess we'll dive into paragraph number 8 or comment number 8, if you will. My concern with this is that in March of 2020, when the previous version of the 537 was being prepared, Clairton Municipal Authority issued us a letter that said they were not able to accommodate the project. They are in the midst, as I understand it, of expanding their plant currently to increase their capacity. I believe they're in phase 2. Maybe phase 2 is not yet complete, but I guess the purpose for this comment is I think it's prudent at this stage to approach, as Jason mentioned earlier, not just Clairton Municipal Authority, but all of the entities that lie between us and the treatment plant to obtain those capacity availability letters so that we know for sure when we approve or adopt the 537 plan amendment, we're doing so knowing that adequate capacity is available to receive the project.
And to respond to that, you know, since item number 6 is in play, that's a discussion point with the township. I think while that discussion is ongoing, we get those capacity availability letters from CMA, from South Park, from Jefferson Hills, and meld that together. I think that's a reasonable recommendation, and while this dialogue is going on, get those letters.
Yeah.
I will say that things have changed quite a bit in the 3.5 years since the CMA's letter that was in the 537 plan. They are providing capacity availability requests. They are responding to those affirmatively. And so I think it's reasonable to have those letters in hand before you advertise a plan.
The authority gets a TAP allocation every year, right?
Yes, yes. In our corrective action plan, we have 150 TAPs that are allocated to us typically every year. Use them or lose them by the end of the year, and we haven't sold nearly that many this year, so from our corrective action plan perspective, that won't be an issue.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I'm certain.
Before I have another comment, is there anything from Mr. Kovach's letter that anybody wants to, is there anything needed to be discussed, anything that he had put in his letter? No? I mean, I read through it and everything, I didn't
I as well.
specifically see anything, but make sure they know about that. Also, I heard you say about it was an option to go back to the grinder pump alternative, facility. But that would stop any expansion in storage in that part of our community, correct? And that would just, you'd be.
Yeah, that was focused on 19 homes, and I think so we'd have to go get Judge Lucas to change the order, right? Because we had a change to identify the lift station at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, like, a grinder pump alternative would stop anybody from any expansion in to that system, correct?
In terms of
So,
future
I mean, that
growth.
would
In terms of future growth, yeah.
Future growth, I mean, that would be done there. Nobody else over on that side of our community would get sewer, would be the grinder pump alternative.
Is PCSA worried about us going back to the grinder pump?
No, they had it, Mr. Levine has mentioned that if we can't come up with the cost, if we can't, you know, that we
But
could
grinder-
always discuss that again, but not a great alternative at all.
A grinder pump-
Never was a good
The
alternative,
grinder
in my
pump costs
opinion.
more down there anyway.
With
More
never
for
a good
the,
alternative.
it would cost more for the customer, and that would not include Gilmore Road as
It was
well.
very gracious of you guys to even mention that if we couldn't come up with the money, that we would be willing to discuss that, because that was not a great alternative in my opinion.
So what do you need from us? Like, is there a time period we need to react?
Well, this is the township's 537 plan.
Okay.
And obviously, you've got a recommendation from the Peters Creek Authority Board. At some point, you know, once you have those discussions in terms of tapping fees, the ask would be authorization to advertise the plan for the 30-day review and comment period after, you know, those decisions were made, after we have the capacity availability letters. And obviously, we respond to Mr. Stevens' letter here.
So we don't have a drop dead date next Friday?
I'm sorry, Mr.
We
Mayor?
don't have a drop dead date next Friday?
I don't see that there's a drop dead date of next Friday. Again, this is, and, you know, our board is in budgeting season. Want to move this project forward in accordance with the MOU. Is the regulatory agencies, you know, have our backs against the wall? No.
So, does the board, Mr. Wilson, you have any questions of the engineer?
No, I've been following all this since before I was even on board, so.
Well, hey, Jason, could you talk a little bit about, Act 537 on record approved by DEP says grinder pumps.
That's correct.
So
It does.
there is a possibility that they could get impatient and go put pressure to go enact that.
They could.
We got that right now somewhere
Yeah,
else.
we got that somewhere else right now.
And what I will say is, shortly after our meeting in February, where we discussed the MOU and that concept, I had a discussion with, the lead from the state that heads the water wastewater division. And I gave him a call and said, both Union Township and Peters Creek are thinking that they're gonna move forward with the gravity option. They were glad to hear it. And, so they know that this plan and the permits are coming for the gravity option. So I don't see them being super aggressive coming after the township to implement the grinder pump alternative when we have a judge's order that doesn't necessarily say that.
Well, the order was modified to approve the gravity system.
Yes, that's what I mean, yeah.
Mr. Spore, do you have any questions, concerns?
Not necessarily a concern, but a clarification. As the cost, the total cost is not projected with the proposed service area.
Okay, so you have a concern about the cost increase, is that what you're saying?
No, I just want a clarification of
So
what
that number.
the projected cost is. Is it $2 million?
Projected cost is $2,041,700.
Okay.
And Mr. Sawyer's will pick up half of it.
He got some money on his garage sale this week.
Jason, is it worth a real quick discussion about I'll call it an alternative of the shorter force main
Sure,
going up
yeah,
to
yeah,
Victoria?
your item, 9.
Which
Sure.
is item 9. I think we've done well to touch on the other items in my letter as part of this conversation, but that would be kind of the last.
Yeah, and one of the key items early in the design program, one of our board members identified of a potential option to connect into, Mr. Barnes, to connect into the collection system that serves our Pleasant View neighborhood. The force main, instead of pumping to the high point of Finley Elrama Road where Peters Creek system ends, it would essentially pump over to Pleasant View. Shorter force main, less costs. We did a good hard look at that alternative. And one of the key elements is that the sewer lines on Pleasant View, some of them were installed with minimal grade on it.
Right.
It's grade less than the current day standards of 0.4% or 0.4 feet per foot. So we did a spreadsheet analysis,
Yeah.
and it's in the 537 plan that says that our 8-inch lines at 0.3% grade have capacity to serve.
Right.
Okay, it clearly says that in there. And we brought that to the Peters Creek board, had a frank discussion, and obviously it costs more to pump to the top of Finley Elrama Road. And I think, and Chris or any of my board members can chime in, the way that the board left it is we currently don't have a problem up on Pleasant View, up on Victoria Circle
Yeah.
with sewer capacity. And resolving a problem in the Finley Elrama Road area, why take the risk of, when a lift station kicks on, it's contributing 200 gallons per minute. Why potentially have a risk of creating a problem in Pleasant View where one doesn't already exist? And our board voted, and we had a long discussion about this, and our board voted that our board's preferred option is alternative one, which is the connection point at Finley Elrama Road. They didn't take that lightly, and obviously our board here this evening, the biggest discussion, the biggest concern that Mr. Levy mentioned is with the concerns in terms of the project costs. But again, our board didn't take it lightly, and it's their collective thinking that spending the additional money, conveying that flow to the sewer lines that come down Finley Elrama Road that has good slopes till we get to our interceptor sewer at the bottom of the hill was the best alternative to implement.
DJ?
I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think, I certainly have a different perspective than Lennon Smith does and the authority does in terms of there being a plan prepared. So I guess from a surface level, the shorter force main presents an opportunity for cost savings and capital naturally. I guess just thinking about this now though, I'm not sure if you mentioned this earlier, Jason, or not, but if we were to pump up to Victoria, we would be pumping twice because you then flow down to a separate pump station, which
And that's a key element.
would be
that
maybe counterproductive
Yeah,
as well.
that on certain areas to Victoria, it flows by gravity and makes the bend. That Coal Bluff lift station only serves a localized
Okay.
area of about 20, so it wouldn't be pumped twice.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Wastewater facilities manual states that for an 8-inch sewer, you're supposed to have a minimum of 0.4%, which some of these sewers were not installed with that. I looked at your at the table that was presented, and looks to me as if the sewer segment with the lowest capacity has approximately 230 or so thousand gallons remaining. And the anticipated flow from the project is 27,000 if you take 69 EDUs times 400. So I guess, yeah, I guess I just wanted to raise it for group's consideration here as a potential cost savings to pump 250 feet as opposed to 2,000.
Yeah, and the other element, that was entered into the discussion with our board is, and those sewers were put in before the current wastewater manual was implemented by DEP?
Sure.
And if we propose connection to Victoria Circle in that area, DEP may come back and say, okay, we'll let you do that, but you gotta increase the slopes of these 4 or 5 lines, which obviously adds to the cost. And
Is it a worthwhile question to pose to the department as?
you can ask them, but probably not gonna give you an answer.
Sure. Yeah.
But, you know, I think that would, in my mind, you know, we could schedule that discussion, it's probably 2 to 3 months out. They're not gonna answer, the question. They may say that we won't approve, connecting to any sewers that are less than 0.4%.
Sure.
And, you know, that defers us another 2 to 3 months.
Right.
Or they say, yeah, you can connect there, but replace these 5 lines. The key element, and it's just not replacing those 5 lines, because it's a minimal grade for a couple segments in a row, so you'd be chasing grade.
Right.
And kind of, and again, we took a real hard look at that, not relying on the record drawings, but actually field surveying those manholes and calculating the grade
Yeah.
to see if it was possible. And at the end of the day, the authority board just wasn't comfortable with it.
Yeah, and to your point, you know, we've got $154,000 in the cost estimate for the force main as it is. So, you know, if you reduce that by 2/3, potentially, you're saving $100,000 on a $2 million project. So, you know, I think the authority has legitimate concerns, and if pumping an additional distance is a way to appease those, I think that's absolutely a valid consideration. I guess, I just wanted to include the conversation point in our letter to flush it out in its entirety.
Valid comment.
All right, anything else?
Nothing, okay, thanks.
All right, Larry, anything else then?
No, sir, that's fine.
Linda, anything else?
No, I think that, that was pretty, definitive.
From the parish?
One thing that Larry brought up about the difference in cost, that it's on there that we would split the cost, half would be, paid by PCSA and the other half by Union Township. So that it's not all for the township, it would be split 50-50, the additional cost.
And they would be willing to look into options for us to recoup the additional admin fees.
Right.
Through a debt payment.
Yeah.
Right, we would not
Right, they would have both.
stand in your way.
Yeah, they're not opposed to talking about it.
No, right.
They wouldn't stand in our way.
But I just, when Mr. Spar said, I thought maybe we were gonna have to pick, we 50-50 split on the additional cost.
Could I clarify one thing? So if we didn't have the discussion, if you didn't need the additional debt service, discussion, and you have to figure out your hard numbers, I hear you say, Jason, that we need those actual figures in this Act 537?
Correct.
Okay, so you could, technically, you couldn't approve the Act 537 amendment tonight if you wanted to, because we can't submit it without those hard numbers.
That's the reason why I asked if it would drop bid date next Friday, because I think the township has to have discussion in this next week or so. Yeah, maybe next Thursday, I've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'll occupied. Maybe we come by next Thursday, have a continuation meeting and figure out what we wanna do, and then get back to you by, when's your next meeting?
Monday.
This coming Monday?
Mhm.
We're not gonna get to you next Monday.
Yeah, it just happens to be this Monday coming up. And if you look at the schedule that we have been going by so far, let me see what page it's on. 4, thank you. completion date is anticipated December of 2024. And that's if everything, keeps moving along. With that being said, any grants that we're applying for in 2024, we would know about before this would ever get to the completion date. And I'm sure it could be safe to say it's possible it could even go into 2025, January, February, March of 2025. So for planning purposes, I could see that spread over 2 years. 2 additional grant application rounds perhaps, and 2 additional budget meetings. So that's sort of how we plan it ahead. So if we know we need $1 million, we're not gonna need it all in this particular year. So that's just food for thought. The last thing I wanted to just mention was, once we get the Act 537 going, we do what we do with each of our sewer line extensions, is then we reach out to the customers that are affected by it. And then we have what we call a workshop meeting with those particular customers.
We were gonna do that as well.
Okay.
Maybe another public meeting with them, and you, that would be great.
So, just our last one we happened to have was Bower Hill Road sewer line extension. So we had
I attended that.
You did, that's right. The customers were there, and we planned that, in such a way so that each resident had their, easement agreement and their exhibit. So they had some time to review it and then bring it with them to that particular meeting. We had a notary on site at the time, so that anybody that was comfortable signing it, we got 8 quarters of those easement agreements signed at that workshop meeting.
So how long from the time we all make a decision on this, do we have, because we are responsible to secure those easements as far as the MOU. So, when would we, from the time we make a decision, how long do we have? Because that's a great idea to get them out there to them, have them come in for the discussion.
Well, we would plan around that.
Yeah.
We would plan around knowing when your residents would have those in their hands.
Well, you'd have to have design all that. So
Yeah.
that's way down the road.
Well, that's where we had,
Well, not really. We're gonna bid in May and pre-construction meeting in June of '24.
So you have your design done by summertime?
Yeah,
2024?
getting back to my point prior, the planning, that document and the design was in parallel tracks, if you will. So the design's nearly completed, okay, ready to submit to DEP, follows along, that planning document. And, again, as soon as once all the i's are dotted, t's are crossed with the 537 plan, the following week, we're gonna submit the permit. And in terms of, the schedule, what we identified is roughly from mid-December through April, that, 4-month period.
So we'll need the design drawings attached to the easement.
That's right.
So
Yes.
it's supposed to be 20-foot, permanent, 40-foot construction?
Well, those are items that we still have to discuss. Our recommendation would be a 20-foot permanent right-of-way. Does it need to be tied to a meets and bounds description? Some
I would
attorneys
like to have
prefer
it.
that, some don't.
I like to have it, because otherwise someone's gonna sue you.
I think it does, if I could just add, for the recorder of deeds office. If we wanna get those recorded and the meets and bounds description is included, it goes through much faster and simpler.
If you put the meets and bounds and show points and distances, that way it solves all the problems. I had a situation a number of years ago where we didn't do that, and someone said, well, that's not what I thought it was, and so if we have it all pinpointed, it makes life easier.
And again, those are discussions that we still have to have yet. But that process, at least in terms of the schedule, is, roughly mid-December through the April timeframe.
And just one other thing, whoever printed the schedule, next time make it a little bit bigger so we can slow it, you can see it.
True, those young.
Young guy at
It's
the
my
end.
young 32-year-old eyes.
But
And I-
Blew it
regardless,
up on a poster board for you?
regardless, you need to not sit on this and move, because you don't have as much time as you think. If we're bidding in May, you're gonna have your property acquired, your easement. So May is the 5th month.
And a public.
We're in September.
I've done this,
You got, well, you got 7 to 9 months.
Well, that's correct, but we can't even approach property owners until we have easement documents prepared, and those
Yeah.
easement documents are
In-
contingent upon the
That's why we're
final sign.
asking, yeah,
Yeah.
that's why we're
Indeed.
saying.
So you don't need to get this by next Friday, but you can't wait until December, January.
No, we're not
Okay.
saying that. That's it. Like I said, I looked at the schedule here, it said you can just blow it up next time. I don't even look at it, it's hard to review, but I've done a number of sewer projects and water projects, we'll move on it.
Right.
As soon as we get the drawing. Well, what we'll do probably like I've done elsewhere, like Michelle said, we'll have a meeting here, we'll invite the people. In fact, we'll have maybe you here, the engineer, both engineers, they'll go through and show what the project's about. They'll have, questions, the people can then, ask questions of the TJ or ask questions of you or whoever to see what's going on here and so forth. And that's the first step.
And like they did with Bower Hill, if they had
Right.
their easements in hand.
Right.
Yeah,
it would
I'll be on
yeah,
site
she can
to
notarize it.
notarize it.
Right, we
So
can
it's-
have them in with the easements in hand.
So you-
And we write that in our letter to the country.
And that's why I asked the question, I posed the question because I don't wanna hold you back, I was trying to get from you when we need to start getting those easements,
Right.
like when we.
And I
how
can
fast we
share
go.
from just experience, an example of the easement from the Bower Hill Road, which did have the meets and bound description as well as a diagram. And the language came from Mr. Bonanno's office. And then the other information came from, our engineer's office. So I can show you the examples, it seemed to work really well.
But going back to this, Jim, we're not gonna, if we start the
That was
process,
my
we're not gonna
point.
sit on it.
It sounds like you're aware of the time frame and can move appropriately. That was my point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and to that end directly, item 14 in our letter here is, more or less a recommendation to the township that as Lennon Smith is finalizing a 537 plan, I think it's a prudent next step to address, Mr. Barnsworth, that property owner there where the pump station is proposed to go, and have him involved in this conversation. And, from a property acquisition standpoint, have some preliminary conversation.
That would be with the easements in hand, qualified for a public meeting.
You'd have a public meeting, you'd bring
And
everybody in.
there wouldn't need to be one before that, like.
I know.
Okay.
And one more point of clarification, the gentleman that's concerned about pump station, Burnsworth, is that his name?
Mr. Burnsworth.
Is that something we need to be in on the conversation?
Yeah, let's talk about it at our meeting.
It looks like from what Michelle showed in this drawing, or whatever it is, this one thing, it looks like it's more on EQT property than anything else.
The property next to his, it seems to be 90% of the property next to his, but.
On the Walton property. There's,
That Walton? Okay.
yeah, there's a property line right there.
Yeah.
Part of the Walton property is bisected with the EQT.
So it's not on his property all of it, so it's just.
It is.
Oh, just a little bit, it's partial.
Strip.
No, I think the best thing to do is to someone take him up to this place here where you have a lift station, show him what's up.
Yeah, I can understand his concerns, I don't know what a lift station looks like necessarily, and if you were out in my front yard saying you're putting a lift station for sewage, I'd be like, whoa.
Maybe the best thing-
That's where he's at, he's like, whoa.
Maybe the best thing to do is tell him what the purpose of the lift station is.
He's a very nice gentleman, he has concerns, he's been to your meetings, he's even spoken at your meetings, he's the gentleman that's been there. He's been very interested in getting sewage, he's been one of the people that's very interested in getting it. He just was concerned when he saw you all out there and what that means about to his property value, what he wants to maybe do with his property in the future. He has concerns, that's all, but he's a really reasonable person in my opinion.
Okay, anything else, Steve? No. Michelle?
I have no more.
Chuck?
I'm good.
Larry?
No, sir.
Linda?
No,
And
I'm
you,
good.
anybody on your board? You guys have talked it to death, I know.
I would just